Hi everyone, and welcome back to the show. I'm Dr. Thorne. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you truly trusted your own balance? Not just walking across a flat kitchen floor, I mean stepping off a curb, turning around quickly when someone calls your name, or reaching up to grab something off a high shelf without that little flicker of doubt in the back of your mind. If you're over 70, that flicker is common. And here's what most people don't realize. Falls aren't just bad luck. They're not something that just happens as we age. In most cases, they're the result of one thing quietly weakening in the background, and it's not what you'd expect. Today, I'm going to show you a single, simple exercise. It takes just a few minutes a day, you can do it at home, no equipment needed, and it directly targets the #1 hidden cause of falls in adults over 70. I've seen this one movement make the difference between someone who's afraid to leave the house alone and someone who's confidently gardening, traveling, and playing with their grandkids again. So stick with me, because by the end of this episode, you'll know exactly what to do, and more importantly, why it works. Most people assume falls happen simply because of bad luck. A wet floor, an uneven sidewalk, a missed step in poor lighting. And yes, those things play a role. But if you look closely at the research, and if you've spent as many years working with older adults as I have, you start to notice a pattern that most people completely miss. The environment isn't usually the real problem. The real problem is happening inside the body, quietly, months or even years before that fall ever occurs. Here's what I mean. As we age, our nervous system and our muscles go through a process called sensorimotor decline. In plain terms, this means the connection between what your body senses and how it reacts starts to slow down. When you're young, if you start to tip slightly to one side, your brain gets that signal almost instantly, and your muscles fire within a fraction of a second to correct it. You don't even think about it, it just happens. But somewhere in our 60s and 70s, that reaction time changes. The signal takes longer to travel, the muscles respond a little slower, and most importantly, one particular group of muscles, the ones responsible for what we call postural stability, begins to weaken faster than almost any other muscle group in the body. These are the deep stabilizing muscles in the hips, ankles, and core that don't get used much in everyday walking, but that become absolutely critical the moment your balance is challenged. This is why so many falls don't happen while someone is just walking in a straight line. They happen during a quick turn, a sudden stop, reaching for something, or stepping onto an uneven surface. In that split second, the body needs those stabilizing muscles to fire instantly and correct the imbalance. If they've weakened, which they do, silently, without any pain or obvious symptom, the body simply can't catch itself in time. And here's the part that surprises people the most. This muscle weakening doesn't announce itself. There's no warning sign, no ache, no stiffness that tells you, hey, your balance system is deteriorating. You can feel completely fine, walk normally every single day, and still be losing the exact strength and reflexes you'll need the moment something unexpected happens. That's what makes this so dangerous. It's invisible until the moment it isn't. I've talked to hundreds of families who tell me the same story. Mom was fine. Dad was totally independent. And then, seemingly out of nowhere, one fall changed everything. A hip fracture, a hospital stay, a loss of confidence that never fully returns. But when you look closer, it wasn't really out of nowhere. The weakness had been building for years. The fall was just the moment it became visible. This is also why simply telling someone to be more careful or use a cane doesn't actually solve the underlying issue. Being careful doesn't rebuild the stabilizing muscles. A cane doesn't restore the speed of the nervous system's reaction time. These are helpful tools, but they don't address the root cause. They only manage the symptom. What actually needs to happen is targeted, specific strengthening of that stabilization system, training the exact muscles and reflexes responsible for catching you the moment your balance shifts. This is fundamentally different from general exercise, walking, or even most standard strength training programs. It has to directly challenge the balance system in a safe, controlled way, so the body relearns how to react quickly and confidently. And this is exactly where the exercise I'm about to show you comes in. Now let's talk about the exercise itself, because I want to be very clear about something first. This is not one of those complicated fitness routines you see online with 15 steps, special equipment, or instructions that require a physical therapist standing next to you. If it were complicated, most people simply wouldn't do it consistently, and consistency is the entire point here. What I'm about to walk you through is something you can do in your own living room, next to a sturdy chair or countertop, in about 5 minutes a day. The exercise is called the single leg stance progression, and while the name sounds technical, the movement itself is refreshingly simple. You stand near something stable, a countertop, the back of a heavy chair, a wall if needed, and you shift your weight onto one leg, lifting the other foot just slightly off the ground. That's it. That's the starting point. You hold that position, using the support as little as possible, for a set amount of time, then switch to the other leg. Now I know what some of you might be thinking. That's it? That seems too simple to matter. And I understand that reaction because we've been trained to believe that anything effective has to be complicated or exhausting. But remember what we talked about earlier. Falls happen because of a breakdown in the communication between your nervous system and your stabilizing muscles. This exercise directly targets that exact system. When you lift one foot off the ground, your body is forced to recruit those deep stabilizing muscles in the ankle, hip, and core almost immediately, because there's no other way to stay upright. You're not just building strength in a general sense, you're retraining the specific reflex pathway that catches you during a real-world stumble. Here's how the progression works, and I want you to really pay attention to this part, because the progression is what makes this so effective over time. In the beginning, you'll likely need to hold on to that counter or chair with both hands, and that's completely fine. That's exactly where you should start. As your balance improves over days and weeks, you'll notice you need less support. Maybe you go from 2 hands to 1 hand, then from 1 hand to just a fingertip resting on the surface for reassurance. Eventually, many people reach a point where they can do it with no support at all, simply hovering their hand nearby in case they need it. The key is holding each position for around 20 to 30 seconds per leg, and doing this 2 to 3 times per side once a day. That's the entire exercise. No equipment, no gym membership, no complicated schedule to remember. You can do it while brushing your teeth in the morning, while waiting for your coffee to brew, or while watching the news in the evening. What makes this particular exercise so powerful is that it mimics real-life imbalance in a controlled, safe environment. Think about it. When do most falls actually happen? It's rarely while calmly walking in a straight line. It's when you're reaching for something on a shelf, turning to answer the door, or stepping over a small obstacle, all situations where your weight briefly shifts onto one leg while your body scrambles to stabilize. By practicing that exact scenario daily in a safe setting where you have something to hold on to, you're essentially rehearsing the moment before it happens in real life, training your body to react instinctively and quickly when it truly counts. Over time, what we see happen is remarkable. The muscles around the ankle and hip strengthen. The nervous system's response time speeds back up. Confidence returns because the body starts trusting itself again. And this isn't theoretical. This is based on how balance training research consistently shows improvement in fall risk when this kind of targeted progressive exercise becomes part of a daily routine. Let's dig into why this exercise actually works from a physiological standpoint, because understanding the why is what turns this from just another exercise recommendation into something you'll actually stick with. When you understand what's happening inside your body during those 20 or 30 seconds of standing on one leg, this simple movement suddenly makes a lot more sense. Your body's ability to stay upright depends on 3 main systems working together in constant, split-second communication. The first is your vestibular system, located in the inner ear, which tells your brain where your head is positioned in space. The second is your visual system, which gives your brain information about your surroundings and helps orient you. And the third yard, the one most people never think about, is your proprioceptive system, which relies on sensors in your muscles, tendons, and joints to tell your brain exactly where your limbs are and how much force they're generating at any given moment. As we age, all 3 of these systems can decline somewhat, but the proprioceptive system, the one tied directly to muscles and joints, tends to weaken the fastest, especially if it isn't regularly challenged. And here's the important part. Proprioception is trainable. Unlike some aspects of aging that we can't easily influence, this particular system responds remarkably well to targeted practice, even well into our 70s, 80s, and beyond. When you stand on one leg, You're doing something that very few daily activities actually demand. Regular walking, sitting, and even most standard exercise routines keep both feet on the ground or move in predictable, supported patterns. But single-leg standing forces your ankle, knee, and hip joints to make constant micro-adjustments, tiny corrections you're not even consciously aware of, in order to keep you from tipping over. Every one of those micro-adjustments is a rep for your nervous system. You're essentially sending thousands of small signals back and forth between your muscles and your brain, sharpening the speed and accuracy of that communication with every session. This is fundamentally different from traditional strength training, like using weights or resistance bands. Strength training absolutely has its place, and I'm not dismissing it, but it primarily builds the size and power of a muscle. It doesn't necessarily improve how quickly your brain can call on that muscle in an emergency. You could have strong leg muscles and still fall, because the issue isn't always a lack of strength. It's a delay in the signal telling those muscles to react. Balance training, specifically single-leg work like this, closes that gap between sensing an imbalance and correcting it. There's also something happening at the level of the brain itself that's worth mentioning. This kind of balance practice engages what's called motor learning, a process where the brain builds and reinforces neural pathways through repetition. Every time you practice that single-leg stance, your brain is essentially rehearsing the exact sequence of muscle activations needed to prevent a fall. Over time, this sequence becomes more automatic, meaning your body can respond to a real stumble faster and more efficiently, without you having to consciously think through what to do. Research in this area consistently supports what we're describing here. Studies on older adults have shown that balance-specific training, done consistently over a period of weeks, leads to measurable improvements in postural control and a reduction in fall incidence. This isn't a fringe theory or something I've simply observed anecdotally in my own experience. It aligns with a growing body of evidence in geriatric health and physical therapy that emphasizes proprioceptive and balance training as one of the most effective low-risk interventions available for reducing falls in adults over 70. What makes this especially encouraging is that the nervous system remains adaptable at any age. Many people assume that once you're past a certain point in life, decline is simply inevitable and irreversible. But motor learning and proprioceptive improvement don't have an expiration date. With consistent practice, the same 20 to 30 seconds a day we discussed earlier can meaningfully rebuild that communication system between your body and your brain, restoring a level of stability and confidence that many people assumed was permanently lost. I want to share some real stories with you now because numbers and physiology are important, but they don't always capture what this actually means for someone's day-to-day life. Let me tell you about a woman I worked with. I'll call her Margaret, in her mid-70s, who came to me after a fall in her own kitchen. Nothing dramatic had caused it. She simply turned to grab a towel off the counter, her weight shifted, and down she went. No broken bones that time, thankfully, but something else broke that day: her confidence. In the months that followed, Margaret stopped doing things she used to do without a second thought. She stopped going for her morning walks alone. She started avoiding stairs whenever possible, even opting to sleep in a downstairs room rather than risk the staircase to her bedroom. She stopped babysitting her grandchildren because she was afraid she wouldn't be able to react quickly if one of them ran toward her or needed to be caught. Her world, quite literally, got smaller. And this is something I see over and over again. The physical fall is often less damaging in the long run than the psychological aftermath. The fear of falling again becomes its own condition, one that steals independence just as effectively as an injury would. When Margaret started incorporating the single-leg stance progression into her daily routine, the changes didn't happen overnight, and I want to be honest about that. The first week, she could barely hold the position for 5 seconds without grabbing onto her counter with both hands. But she stuck with it. By week 3, she noticed she could let go with one hand. By week 6, she was holding steady with just a fingertip for balance. And by around the 2-month mark, something shifted that went beyond just the physical improvement. She told me she felt, in her words, like herself again. She started walking outside again, first around the block, then further. She went back to babysitting her grandchildren. She took the stairs in her own home without gripping the railing like her life depended on it. And what struck me most in our conversations wasn't just that her balance had improved. It was that her entire relationship with her own body had changed. She went from feeling like her body was something unpredictable and unreliable, something that might betray her at any moment, to feeling like she could trust it again. I've heard similar stories from men in their 80s who went from being afraid to garden, worried about bending down and not being able to get back up safely, to spending entire afternoons outside tending to plants they'd given up on years earlier. I've heard from adult children who called just to say their parents sounded happier on the phone, more like the person they remembered from years before the fall that had scared everyone in the family. This is really what fall prevention is about at its core. It's not just about avoiding a hospital visit or a broken hip, even though those outcomes matter enormously. It's about preserving someone's ability to live their life the way they want to live it, to play with grandchildren without hesitation, to travel without constant worry, to move through their own home with confidence instead of fear. Independence isn't just a medical outcome. It's dignity. It's identity. It's the difference between feeling like a capable adult in charge of your own life and feeling like a liability that needs to be watched and managed. What I find most encouraging about stories like Margaret's is how quickly things can turn around once someone starts doing the right kind of work. This isn't a situation where you need months or years to see change. Most people notice a real difference in how stable and confident they feel within just a few weeks of consistent daily practice. The body wants to recover this ability. It's simply been waiting for the right kind of signal, the right kind of practice, to remind it how. So that's the exercise, and more importantly, that's the why behind it. Falls aren't random, and they're not something you simply have to accept as part of getting older. The truth is, your body is still capable of relearning balance, rebuilding those stabilizing muscles, and restoring that split-second reaction time, no matter what your age is right now. All it takes is 5 minutes a day, a sturdy counter or chair, and a little bit of consistency. If today's episode gave you something valuable, I'd love for you to hit subscribe so you don't miss future episodes where we break down simple, practical ways to protect your health and independence as you age. And please, leave a comment below. Tell me where you're starting from or if you've already tried something like this. Share how it's worked for you. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next episode.